We need to talk to them. Oh, yeah. Okay, councillors, well, rather than contemplate our navels waiting, can we deal with 9.2, review the River Schemes Advisory Group? Chief Executive, she's happy to front this. We'll take it as read. My only question is the reimbursement clause. What is the scale of that, Fiona, in terms of answering questions? And we've got Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. That's the one question I can't answer in terms of the scale of that, and so I'll have to follow up on that matter. I wanted to say that this has been an extended process involving a number of councillors, so we're delighted to bring this to you now. I would expect that the size of the reimbursement would be minor, given that there are 2 meetings a year, and these are people who are in the local areas. So I would, at a hazard a guess, I would say it would be less than $20,000 in terms of the reimbursement for that travel.
Mr. Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. I have real difficulty with the guiding principles that we have here. These are schemes essentially deriving their powers from the 1941 Soil Conservation and Rivers Control Act. And what we've got as the guiding principles is adaptation to our changing climate, working effectively with Māori to deliver outcomes for the region, community participation, and sympathy with natural processes. Now, we're talking about stock banks. That's not a natural process. And I would have thought the guiding principles would have been more akin to what the foundation of the Act is, the Soil Conservation and Rivers Control Act, things like mitigation of flooding risk, protection of property, and enhancing economic production. I just don't think those guiding principles are right.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. Any response? Sorry, Kirsty, we started, and the question Mr. Shirley's raising is he doesn't think the guiding principles are right. My view of this, Councillor Shirley, is that essentially, historically, the advisory groups have been made up of the beneficiaries, those who contribute to the pūtea of running these schemes. Having said that, there are others, Councillor Iti, from local authorities that participate in this. So I have some sympathy for your cause, but essentially I don't think the underlying principle of having people who pay the money and who need to understand what's being done and why it's being done still stands. Councillor Iti, and then Fiona.
Just to give some context to that, Councillor Shirley, because I guess going on 4 years I've sat inside of these forums, the issues that are being confronted by landowners increasingly are like around loss of land and flood mitigation and so forth. The stop banks are only working to a certain level. They're dealing with erosion in the upper catchment of the Whakatane River, for example, where stop banks aren't an issue, but they're still wanting answers from us. So hence sympathy for natural processes, making room for the river, and soft engineering processes is just the reality of working with the river now. And a lot of the members are actually open to that because they're there on the land and they're actually witnessing, oh, well, we can keep on trying to build stop banks higher and bigger, but they can't actually afford it. And so we're having to look at other ways of approaching these issues and finding other solutions. Another issue down on the Rangitaki that we've been dealing with inside of these groups is the salinity issue for some of the farms down by the coastal area, because with the drainage of the wetlands, the salt's getting sucked up into it. So they're realizing that there are consequences to the legacy approach, you could say, of how we've managed these areas. And we're trying to go, okay, well, here's these other solutions. Increasingly, as well as the landscape shifted, and now while we have the working effectively with Māori, is Māori are right in that mix too. When I started here, the Rangitaki River Forum and the Rangitaki River Advisory Group were worlds apart and never the twain shall meet. Bringing those forums together and sharing information, because they're all on the same river, has actually improved relationships within the community, as well as just improved information sharing on finding solutions together and a way forward together. So that's why I'm quite comfortable with these terms of reference, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Yes,
Councillor.
I understand those matters and those issues, but the other thought I had is with these as sort of guiding principles, will that affect the legal case with regard to Edgecombe? Does the risk influencing that? We're up for quite a big risk there financially.
Fiona, I can't answer that.
Through the chair, we're actually getting a legal advice to inform your long-term plan in regards to that, in particular levels of service. So we'll be coming back to you on that particular point. And in regards to these terms of reference, I think Councillor Eadie has said what I was going to say. So for a long time, this council's looked at river scheme sustainability. They've looked at making room for the rivers, and that has guided the principles that have gone into these terms of reference. I also point out the scope of activity for these terms of reference is to make recommendations on scheme management and operations, including capital and maintenance work, proposed annual work programs and budgets, floodplain management strategies, and integrated and collaborative management opportunities. So what you're talking about is an and. It's the and in terms of the stop banks, and it's the and in terms of the future.
Councillor Neves.
Thank you. Speaking as a councillor that's been involved in the review, I think it's important that we keep faith with the people that we've consulted with in the development of these terms of reference. It actually has taken quite a bit of time, and it's been progressing over quite a long period. And they have been to the advisory groups, and they have been to the co-governance groups, and they have signed them off, have given their acceptance to the draft. So I think there's a matter of good faith here. It doesn't stop us from doing another review at a later stage. But what I would point out with regard to the integration now of the co-governance groups with our river schemes, in my observation, that's worked brilliantly. Now there is a greater understanding of what each of the different groups' priorities are, and some really good conversations are being had. So I just think that just to keep faith with the consultation process that we've undergone, that we should be considering signing this off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neves. Councillor McMillan.
I just want to say that 100% support these guiding principles. I think they're fundamental and fully support them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Later on in the month, councillors are being invited to East Cape to have a look at the Whangaparoa River up there. I'm hoping, Mr. Chairman, as part of these terms of reference, this does not preclude an advisory group of those landowners at Whangaparoa, because we've already agreed to have a bit of a pilot program up there, Chris, in terms of making room for the river up there. And I would hope that we could adopt a similar advisory group for Whangaparoa River going forward, rather than just sticking to these four groups, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Look, despite all the process and the terms of reference and all that, it's what we actually do in terms of interfacing with the community that I'd have to say is the success of it. And in the short time I've been to some of them, especially in the Waiweka Otara, I think, and it took us a while to get there, the involvement of Ngāti Ira and some of the other hapu there has added a real difference to the consideration that goes on in that particular river scheme. So it's how we do it. I think is really important.
I'm happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Moved, seconded, Councillor Neves. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you.
Chair, could I draw a rather large bow from this item?
Well, as the arrow is not too sharp.
Oh no, I've cooled down a bit. I'm fine. I was really impressed yesterday with Jane's presentation from the regional tour, and particularly around what ECAN are doing in the river space, etc. And I wonder, Mr. Chair and Fiona, Chief Executive, whether when Mr. Groom initiates his governance review, we might be able to do an analysis of all unitary and regional council committee structures around the country, because it struck me, I think Councillor McMillan said yesterday, that they've got some very novel committee structures, and I just think we could possibly learn from that. So that's just a very wide bow that I wondered whether might be possible for us to pursue.
I see Mr. Groom's here, so no doubt you will note that. Right, thank you, councillors. Can we move through to 9.3, Tauranga Moana Iwi Group representative to Manawa Tawai project, and could I welcome Pia Bennett and others?
Morena koutou, ko Margaret Courtney ahau, he iri tēnei no tūhaurangi Ngāti Wāhia, Ngāti Whakaue, Tapuika, Ngāti Umutahi hoki. I'm Margaret Courtney, I'm in Te Aorangi, Senior Advisor, and working in freshwater policy with Stephen. So this morning we brought to you the Tauranga Moana Initiative. It's a pretty exciting project for Tauranga Moana, and it has the three iwi Ngāti Ranginui Ngātai, Ngāti Pukina involved, and Pia is here to talk about the project. So she's got a small presentation. Many of you will probably know Pia, but she's a dedicated kaitiaki of the area. So, but she can introduce herself.
Tēnā tātou I te whare, ko Pia tōku ingoa he uri tēnei no konei no te moana o Tauranga, te taho taku pāpa, and hei Maketu taku wā kāinga. On my mother's side, I live in Maketu, which is where our homestead is. My father is from Tauranga Moana. My heart remains here in Tauranga Moana. I've got 20 plus years behind me working in the RMA space, but my background was actually science, marine science, and I figured that actually ended up complementing where I landed in the end. This project of ours, Ko Wai Mātou, is a project that belongs to Tauranga Moana. It was developed with many whānau who hail from Tauranga Moana, and it took us maybe 2 years to get to the point where we were able to look at opportunities to fund its implementation. So, 2018, I think we had our first get together, and at that time, freshwater was a hot issue nationally and regionally. So that was the fire that lit the fire in our puku at the time. We are here today with a even though it's been a hard road, we have this unique opportunity, and the regional council has stepped in. Excuse me, my voice is fading. Has stepped in to help and support in ways that we needed that support, them to support us. So the project involves all of Tauranga Moana hapu and whānau, and that's who we hope the impacts will be felt by as well. These are our drivers. They're self-explanatory. They're no different. They're not special. They are special, but they're no different to a lot of other projects that hapu and whānau want to get into. We've got the opportunity now to make it happen. So one side there, you've got what inspired us, really, the drivers, and what keep us there working away to realise the things on the right-hand side, which are the impacts, where we want the impacts to be realised and to to really reveal themselves. There's this one more. So I was just asked to come and just talk briefly about a bit of background, and then how the project, who will be part of the operational team who are actually on the ground delivering the project, or what those roles might include. I just want to start by backpedaling and saying like 85% of the funding that we receive or that we have been awarded is going straight back into the employment and straight back to employing people, which is like 1.5 mil back into this region. And that's really important that it's used in that way, because we think that's how we maximise wellbeing benefits. So we've got a team. We're going to have a core team of 6. So we have a project lead, a project navigator, who will be quite critical to in the early phase, to making sure that everything's in place, working with the council team to ensure the systems are working well, etc., etc. And the other 4 roles are roles that are more engaging with our hapu, our whānau and kaitiaki. So those are hapu project leaders, who will be sort of the interface between the central team and the kaitiaki and the whānau who are involved in supporting the project. And so we've got 4 project leads, 4 hapu project leads, and then we've got each project lead will have 5 kaitiaki underneath them, employed to do the work. And we've just pulled together a specialist group who are kaitiaki with science backgrounds, who we want to train in flow gauging and data management techniques, and so that they are the kaitohu tohu our flow technicians. We need flow technicians in order to be able to verify or validate some of the cultural flow preference work that we're doing in different rivers, and so it complements the cultural mahi as well. And so minimum 27 people empowered through gaining skills, knowledge, specialist training, and being employed by the project.
Thank you, Pia. We're super, super, super excited about this. It's been a long time coming, a lot of effort from our Chief Executive in terms of the relationships. Also, Councillor McDonald has been there. We've worked really closely with iwi and with MFE. So it is funded by MFE, and the iwi did reach out to our Chief Executive and said, can you support by holding the funds and helping us in this way? And so we're seeking your support and approval for the funding arrangements, and also endorsement of the MOU that sits alongside it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Pia, for those comments. And Margaret, could I just acknowledge your report here, which I thought was very clear. The decision points were clear, and the decision you want from the council was also very clear. Essentially, the council's been asked to be the administrator or look after this. The only question I've got is, are you happy that, Pia, that you can put in place the administration and the legal entity within 6 months, where in fact the regional council then backs out and you run this yourselves?
The first part to that, sorry? Am I happy? Are we happy?
Yeah. Are you confident that you can put in the legal entity and the respective people to run the administrator, and so the regional council can pass the responsibility over to Tauranga Moana within that 6-month period?
That's the short answer.
Councillor Shirley, is it?
I had the same concern, Chairman. I think it's a fantastic project and well presented. But I was staggered that MFE effectively granted $2 million without a legal entity to go to. It's actually in breach of the Auditor General's rules. So I was somewhat staggered by that. And I just see the same risk that you saw, where by default have to be the administrator until such time that that legal entity can be established. And I was seeking the same assurance that, and I noticed that we have allocated 300,000 support, I think it is in the long-term plan. I was just wondering, will we incur additional costs to that 300,000 that we have allocated acting as the administrator, or will that 300,000 cover that role as well?
So I think to help you with the question, Fiona, 300,000 was spread over 3 years. And I think what Mr. Shirley's asking is, on top of that, is there in-kind support that hasn't been budgeted outside the 300,000?
So through you, Chair, it's a very small amount that is required when we act as the bank. We've treated this contract as any other that we have. So we effectively act as a bank for many government agencies, for local councils, and in some respects for entities such as this one. And it is a minimal cost to, say, our finance team to do that. In the future, that is something that you would have to look at in terms of your long-term plan, in terms of, say, what is the cost of acting as a bank, but this is very minimal in terms of the service that this council provides to a range of entities.
Fiona, Councillor McDonald, and Councillor White.
Sorry. First of all, congratulations to staff and to you, Pierre. It has been a long and arduous journey, and I'm pleased that it's got to the point now. I guess to the concerns raised by the chair and Councillor Shirley, I too am very optimistic alongside Pierre as the establishment of an entity. I know there have been, that you're not aware of, there have been discussions and inroads made in that direction. I guess we just had to escalate the process out of fear of losing the ability to access this funding from MFE. The other thing I want to state is that we should be looking at this as all part of the discussion. We've been talking around transformational change. And that transformational change is how we work along central government to access funding to support initiatives that we want to promote in our own region. And this is one of them. So there has been a lot of discussion toing and froing with MFE. Sometimes I've got to say we did get into some heated arguments, albeit we've reached a stage where I think we can all be proud of, albeit we haven't quite finished the journey yet. So I guess what I'm saying is this is new, and we shouldn't be afraid to pursue this pathway. And I just hope that in building the capacity of tangata whenua, that we continue to do that in our role as regional councillors and staff, to help build that capacity. And I'm still hoping that in the establishment of the entity that is required to be set up, that the support by regional council will remain until such time we do have that entity set up. But rest assured, there will be. I even have my own ideas of what some of those entities can be, some of those existing entities who are already representing the three iwi of Tauranga Moana that are not necessarily connected to the iwi rūnanga, but certainly are representative of the three iwi that can be pursued if not wanting to establish a brand new entity. So with that, I want to kind of allay your fears that there are independent entities out there that could be approached to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor White.
Tēnā koe te tuihine I te wahine toa pia mō tō kaupapa tino tāhua. Me koutou hoki te tīma tautoko kei te mehatu ki a koutou. Yeah, there is another one, Wahapu or Waihi, that's been in a similar situation. Raised the money, and your mother has been a part of that, Rowan, has been part of that as well. And the whole principle here is an enabling thing for iwi to take a lead in looking at solutions by iwi for iwi in this particular situation that can work from an alliance that's been drawn. And one of the issues here is around how our people can come together to actually procure these resources that won't be accessible easily by council, but bring a lot of value to the council. So that's the point. You know, it's not a one-way traffic here at all, and I'm not saying that the council is saying that, but in the context of just thinking about this value created by this type of enterprise, between this enterprise and Wahapu, there's $5 million that's been accessed via MFE, which would not have been accessed directly by regional council, and yet the value of that is huge for us. So look, I'm looking at it from a value proposition. I'm also looking at it from the point of view of the reciprocity that exists in this particular space. And I'm big on reciprocity. If you give back. So, and this is a really lovely balance that often is not practiced by systems. There's always one-way traffic. And this is very different. And it's reset, as Mati Moana has said, in the way we can do our business. And this has been reflected as well, Mr. Chair, in the Marawata conversations we've had as well, around reciprocity issues and around value add issues and about iwi taking a lead and supporting by the system and not having a fear to go down this pathway. So I want to congratulate you on that and look forward to your very great success, as I do with your mother's other participation in the Wahapu as well. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Scott.
Good morning. Just really some clarifying thoughts. So in the short term, you have a grant from MFE to do a project. And you're asking us for basically 300,000, which will help with HR sort of systems, helping establish the entity and that sort of short-term stuff. That's fine. If I've got that right, then an outcome is that there will be some people who there'll be some knowledge about what the project entails, which is fantastic. It's what we do. And then there'll be some people who are trained up. I thought you said 27, but the paper says 7. So it's some range between there. So my question in terms of the long term, first of all, in the short term, do those people get counted as, you know, when we report as a council as contractors and consultants that may come back to bite us as a number in the public? So that's a short-term question, and we just have to get our comms right on that. The long-term question is, does this establish ongoing projects that the council will be responsible for into the future? And what are the implications of that?
Executive.
So through the chair, the answer is no to both of those questions. And just to remind councillors, in your last long-term plan, you had a number of submissions and you gave deep consideration to how we progressed the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. And it was recognised that one of the key things was the need to develop Māori capacity and capability in this space. There was actually a submission from Tauranga Moana iwi then to have approximately $2 million in funding from the Regional Council to do just that, so that the Regional Council could achieve its plan change. At that last long-term plan, you allocated $300,000 towards achieving this aspiration. And in fact, the funding has come through from central government to make this real. So the funding is dedicated from a regional council's perspective in terms of that freshwater work that we require to do our plan change by 2024. This will not mean that there are additional contractors or consultants on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and this will not mean that there will be projects that are ongoing that are unfunded.
Councillor McMillan and Councillor Van Dardilson.
Ina koe pēr and ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I think this is really exciting, so big congratulations. And I've just had one question. So does this talk to Tauranga Moana Advisory Group? What's the relationship with those two groups? How does that look? Just so we're all working together. Yeah.
Kia ora. It started in terms of a reporting line, it was commenced through the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group, and I envisage that that will continue. But also the project has will need to establish a project steering group, and I understand that it makes sense to use the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group iwi representatives to populate that project steering group, as well as some other councillors. I'm not sure about the other membership, but it does definitely have a connection to the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Doddleson.
Yeah, thank you. My question's to the CEO. Does what I like to see in any project is measurable outcomes, and I just want to know where our role is. My understanding is we're just administering the funding to get this going, so we don't have a responsibility. Is there any responsibility for this group to report to us at all, recognising that we are putting in $300,000 towards it? But so do we require measurable outcomes for that 300,000? And can you confirm that we don't have the responsibility is not ours to measure the performance of the project itself?
That is correct, and the measurable outcomes for the 300,000 that the regional council has allocated is through the freshwater program. So that's where you're getting those measures reported to you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I'll move the recommendation. Seconded, Councillor White. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Pierre. Wish you well, and hopefully be back in 3 months with that legal entity set up. Right, before you have cup of tea and scones, councillors, can we deal with 9.4 statement of intent for Quayside? This is the culmination of previous work that you've been involved in. Mr. Taylor. And this is the feedback that's come from Quayside themselves.
Yes, following council's feedback to Quayside, so nothing to add to the report, Mr. Chairman.
Essentially, nothing's changed.
No, just some commentary in the letter from Quayside on the response that council gave.
Yep.
But there will be a future informal briefing from Quayside, your normal quarterly briefing. We weren't quite able to schedule that time to correspond with today, but we will do that in the short near future.
Mr. Winters.
Oh, just on page 81, Matt, bottom paragraph, it reads, Quayside proposes a reconsideration of the dividend policy that calculates a distribution amount based on net assets, total assets less liabilities plus PPS rather than total assets, which aligns with market accepted methodologies. So when that discussion is in the future?
Yes, so we asked for that not to affect the annual plan amount for the dividend. We said, can we please take some time to consider that as an option and the implications going forward? So yes, that matter will come back to you.
So those on page 82, the top there, where we've got a distribution millions for 24, 25 and 26, that will affect those amounts?
Potentially. So the most certain one of that, of course, is the amount we've included in our annual plan now, the 45 million, but the future amounts post that date may be affected by any review of the dividend policy.
Okay, thank you.
And that discussion will occur, as Matt said, in September, right?
Yes.
Any further questions? If not, can we have a mover? Councillor White. Councillor White, you actually can't do it. Councillor Scott's moved. Councillor Winters second, that we receive the statement of intent for Quayside Group, including the Toi Moana Trust. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right, we are going to adjourn for morning tea for 20 minutes. So we will be back here at 11:20. Thank you, councillors. Welcome back, councillors. We're on to item 9.5, local government funding agency statement of intent. Mr. Lecomte, are you fronting this? No?
Kia ora, councillors. So this report's essentially presenting to you the final statement of intent for the LGFA, and items of note in terms of the draft statement of intent that you would have seen earlier in the year is marginal increases to operating profitability for years 1 and 2, and a 2.6 million uptick in profitability for year 3, and the statement of intent's recognition of the uncertainty and risks around the company's role in the Affordable Waters Reform Program. So that's the key elements of change to note from the draft statement of intent to the final one that's in front of you today.
Thank you, Kamara. Any questions? It's moved. Councillor Scott. Seconder, Councillor McMillan. No further questions. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. 9.6, Boplas, statement of intent.
Thank you. And on a similar basis, the Boplas draft statement of intent was received earlier this year. The board considers that they have taken into account any comments and have approved the final statement of intent, which is now presented to councillors. There's no material changes from the draft statement of intent or from previous statements of intent.
Thank you, Mr. Lecomte. Councillor Von Duddleston.
Happy to move, but it's nothing to do with this, but on Boplas itself, I just wonder if we can't get a bit of a feel for where we're going with Boplas. To me, there's a huge, we've already made great progress over time with Boplas, but I think we're still missing opportunities of closer collaboration with our neighbouring TLAs and regional councils to do things so that we don't reinvent the wheel as an individual. And I just wonder is there any thoughts with regard to that? Can the CEO give us an update on that, do you think?
I think, Councillor, this is an annual discussion we have, isn't it?
I know, but it's an opportunity while the topic.
Yes, through the chair, yes. Bearing in mind this is a procurement agency, so it is focusing on procurement. There was an additional performance target added in at the request of the regional council, and that is in terms of ensuring that we actively engage in obtaining political support for identified projects, so that there is more of a focus on getting all the councils and all the councillors to be aware of what projects are on the work programme and what additional ones need to be on the work programme. And that was at your request.
Councillor Neese.
Thank you. No issue with the statement of intent, but I'm interested to know what conversations have been had with regard to impact on Boplas, should the 10 waters entities be stood up. Obviously, it's going to have implications for insurances and all sorts of things. So has that been a topic of conversation?
Not that one specifically, but we are having a number of conversations about insurance full stop. And so just in terms of the context of how the insurance markets are moving, but not in regards to those entities yet. What we need to do is be very clear in terms of the timing for the stand up of the entity for the Bay of Plenty, and then go back from there.
No further questions, councillors. Can we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Neese, Councillor McMillan. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. 9.7, Regional Software Holdings. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Taylor. We've got
thank you,
Everly
Mr. Chairman.
online, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the final statement of intent for 23-24. We are part of an ongoing process for Regional Software Holdings Limited, who have been an established CCO for some time. So Bay of Plenty Regional Council joined recently, and what you'll see at future council meetings is the draft statement of intent presentation, probably from the Chief Executive of our RSHL. So we'll join that cycle, but this is the end of the 23-4 process to set the SOI for this jointly owned CCO.
Thank you. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you for that. It's quite difficult to understand our liability moving forward on this. One, I agree, is a good collective to be in. Software is notoriously expensive on any day, but they're looking at $29 million of investment over the next 3 years, and we're a Class A share, not an Irish share. Can you explain what potentially our liability is going to be from an expenditure point of view moving forward? It's hard to work out.
Yes.
At this point in time.
Yeah, and that particular software program, that common platform for all regional councils to be able to have the opportunity to use, is about the shift from individual councils choosing software and software platforms into a collective. So any liability is taken with the intent that a shared liability is better than an individual council's liability. So the actual program of works for Iris Next Gen that's in this report will be brought to a future council meeting, but it's looking to substitute existing costs we have with existing programs. So doing it as a common platform with others shares that cost rather than all falls on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council having its own individual platform as we do now.
So, Chair, again, in the financial implications, it's got that wonderful phrase that means nothing to us. And I don't know how many times we've asked to have some numbers in there, because I can't go back through the LTP to find out what we were going to do in line 552. So it would be helpful moving forward that when you have financial implications, that it's not just in line with the budget, but there's numbers there. Please.
Through Mr. Chairman, exactly. When council are making decisions over financial implications and cost implications, like through the LTP, we'll absolutely do that.
Thank you, Councillor Nees and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just reading the statement of intent, it actually seems to be a wider entity than just looking after software, because it talks about being a service delivery vehicle for wider regional council sector and related bodies, information, etc. So before we joined, did we have any influence or have any part of that? It seems to be supporting Te Uruhika as well. So I just need to understand, we were outside of it before, but I presume we were still feeding in. So how does that work? This seems to be in two parts, this SOI.
Sorry. Yes.
So I was very pleased that this is on your agenda now, because for a number of years you have been requiring of me to look at shared services, and this will be a mechanism to achieve greater efficiencies across the regional sector, and in particular for Bay of Plenty Regional Council. And it includes things like on page 165, there is a comment about delivering efficiencies to all participating councils through standardised and customer-centric sets of processes for the activities of regional councils. This is a key mechanism to have shared services. In terms of your long-term plan going forward, we recognise the importance of shared services. So we have a sub-activity on shared services in itself that this will be reported under. One of the things that is happening through this is also getting the ability to get central government funding. So, for example, the Farm Environment Plan Shared Services Platform sits within this entity, and that is nearly $2 million in MFE funding coming into the sector to build a standardised platform for farm environment plans. This is something that you've asked for repeatedly in terms of finding efficiencies and also extending shared services. I note Councillor von Dadelson's comment also in terms of finding greater shared services in the Bay, but this is an instrument which will allow you to have greater efficiencies in the future.
Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you. First, a silly question, but where does the integrated ticketing, I was going to say schmozzle, shouldn't say that, should I? Where does that sit with regards to this? That's my first question.
So the national ticketing system is a collaboration of organisations to implement something on behalf and with Whakatahi. So this, the national ticketing system is not part of this CCO and will not be a piece of software that's developed by RSHL. So it's
Okay.
separate.
And my second question leads on from Councillor Neese's comments. What will be the impact of this extended scope for essentially the regional sector on the balance of local government New Zealand membership?
I don't think there's any impact on the balance of local government membership. There is one council, West Coast Regional Council, that is a member of this, that is no longer within LGNZ, but their council is making decisions in terms of, which membership they have. This is a very operational machine to drive greater efficiencies and standardisation and consistency across unitary and regional councils. Councils are joining this because they want the efficiencies that have been gained to date and will be gained. So after this paper was written, Otago Regional Council joined, for example, and so that is what is occurring.
Councillor Scott, then Thurston.
Yeah, I have a question about cybersecurity. If we can be quite in control of our security measures at this council, and we're really relying on these systems in other councils, what considerations been given to that?
Yeah, that's a fundamental principle. There are cybersecurity standards that are attached to any piece of software that the regional council uses, and those same cybersecurity standards will be set because all councils have to comply with those. And the benefit we have is having that on the overall platform that everyone uses, and that's done once. And if those cybersecurity standards are met, then they're met for us. And it's just councils that are using this software. So therefore, as Fiona said, the benefit of us doing it together, 10 councils, is it only needs to be done once and we get the benefit of that rather than 10 councils all trying to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Reference has just been made to the national ticketing system, and I fully realise I'm way off script here now, and I haven't had a chance to mention it to Councillor Von Delson, but can we get a full detailed update on where it is exactly at the moment? Because it's one of these cases that has totally consumed PT with regional councils around the country for years. And we've got all these rumblings now coming out of Auckland saying that they're going to abdicate and pull right out of it. And it's one of these scenarios whether we're all in or we're all out. So I think if the major metropolitan in the country pulls out, we've got a hell of a dog's breakfast on our hands. So can we get an update? Sorry.
Yeah, so through Mr. Chairman,
off script, I appreciate
through Mr. Chairman, I'll include that in a PT committee update because it's the PT committee that normally has had the init update for the ticketing system. So we're in the position as a regional council of having an existing ticketing system. So we're not looking to introduce one, we're looking to change our current one to the new national ticketing system. But I'll include that. I'll speak to Mike Seaborn and make sure we include that on a future agenda.
Auckland have made these pronouncements in the last sort of couple of days. So
yeah, so through Mr. Chairman, I watched that, read that article very closely, and we're all aware of the statements that have been made by Auckland. I don't believe that anyone has said that they're going to pull out of anything at the moment, just that things are under review. So yes, that will be discussed in the council report.
I concur, Councillor Thurston. That sort of commentary does not help in terms of having a national ticketing system and people getting on board with it, trying to make it work, does it?
now we're 5 million people on 2.5 islands, and it's either all in or all out. And here's the major metropolitan going to pull the plug. But I'm sorry, Councillor Von Delson, I haven't had a chance to raise that with you. So my apologies.
Right. Any other questions, councillors? Otherwise, it's been moved by Councillor Winters. We have a seconder. Councillor Crosby. So the recommendation is on page 163. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 9.8 electoral voting systems. I think it was last week, councillors, you had the opportunity to speak with Warwick Lamp on an informal get together. So this should be pretty straightforward. We got Warwick Lamp?
We have got Warwick.
We've got Warwick Lamp. If there's any questions that councillors want reinforced or investigated. So essentially your choice is to A or B or C or do nothing. Councillor Nees, Winters, McMillan.
What is the difference between A and D? because do nothing mandates the status quo, first past the post, but A is also first past the post. So is there a reason for why we have different recommendations there? Does one last for longer, or I don't know?
The outcome for the 2025 elections essentially the same. Warwick, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. If you make an active decision for first past the post, I believe that would apply for the next 2 trienniums.
Yes, although it doesn't really make any difference because you can make a resolution for the next 2, but in 3 years' time, you still have the chance to revisit that anyway. It only is set in concrete for 2 cycles if there was a binding poll, and that's not the case at this point.
Thank you, Warwick. Councillor Winters.
Just happy to move 1, 2A and 3, Mr. Chairman. And in doing so, Mr. Lamp, you said when we were talking to you, an STV voting system is about 45k more for Bay of Plenty Regional Council than a first past the post. And while it ain't broke, I'm happy to move 2A, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, just hold on. So we've got Councillor Winters has moved the recommendation, which will be 1, 2A and 3, which is a notice to the public, and it's been seconded. So it's now open for discussion. So we've got Councillor McMillan, Shirley, and then Von Duddleston.
Yeah, kia ora. Simply for the bullet point, more equitable minority representation, my values have to go to that. I did do a little bit of more researching and digging into that, and it appears that only if you have a wide number of candidates, so for example, in terms of Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the Tauranga constituency, where last time there were 17 candidates, so that would work for that. But if perhaps in the Eastern Bay, it may not influence. Am I right in saying that, Warwick? So if you have a larger pool of candidates, then it shunts it to being more equitable, more opportunities for women, wahine, to be elected. But if there's only, say, 2 candidates going for one position, it doesn't have any outcome at all in that way.
Yeah, that's fair comment, and you're right. We're only as good as the candidates that stand in the number of candidates. And the more there are, then STV plays into that for those reasons and the diversity that may come out of that.
Yeah. So this has been quite challenging for me because I don't want to spend 45,000 on a system when it could be spent on planting trees or whatever. However, if we, in terms of my beliefs in democracy, if we can do anything to enable more diversity, then I have to go with STV. So that will be my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. Councillor Shirley.
Yes, Chair, this is a very important issue. I don't think it's one we should take lightly. Under the circumstances, I certainly support status quo. I think with the uncertainty with local government structure and form and the uncertain times we're in, to do something precipitously to change it now would be unwise until we see where the dust settles in that regard. But what really gets me is that Parliament doesn't have the power to change the electoral system for itself, but somehow here local councils can change their system without consultation from the public. And effectively 14 people in this room could impose a voting system on the 200,000 people of our region. And that just seems wrong in principle to me. And I find it rather incongruous that on the one hand, you have people who really believe in participatory democracy and yet sometimes are happy to see 14 people decide on the voting system. I mean, if you believe in participatory democracy, then surely you'd have to support a poll of the voting public. But on that point, lost my train of thought there. Yeah, no,
We can come back to
yes,
it,
I'll come
Mr.
back.
Shirley.
Yeah.
So we've got Mr. Von Dadelson, and noting that you've seconded that.
Yeah, I
Mr.
was
Von
just
Dadelson.
seconding it, but I support the status quo effectively. I think we risk having poorer participation if we change to an unfamiliar system. And we've seen it in the past when it was only the DHB that was STV and the rest weren't, and the level of participation was very poor. And we've seen Tauranga change, and we've seen a handful of other electorates change, not electorates, councils, TIs change, and then revert back, and that tells me something as well. So I'm for, if it ain't broke, don't change it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll come back to you now, Mr. Shirley.
Yeah. The real concern I have is there seems to be an option missing here. And that option is, and Warwick sort of took it through us when we had the earlier discussion, that if you are going to have a poll, you don't have to have the expensive poll. You can run it at the time of the next local body elections 2025. That's not here as an option. And I think it should have been one of the key options in this paper, because that would be the sensible way to do it. Minimises the costs, and you are actually consulting with the voting public, not 14 people deciding and imposing a voting system that would be quite contentious, which I think is very contrary to participatory democracy. So that was the key issue I had. With single transferable vote, academically, it's a very good system. The Hare-Clark, the Tasmanian Senate has it, the Knesset of Israel has it. And if you believe in proportional representation, which I think is better, it is a good system, but it's only one of the many proportional representation systems. And we had our referendum nationwide in 94 when we left first past the post for the general elections, and that was very contentious at the time. But we had a Royal Commission that did some very good work. They sat for over 2 years and did a very good report. They did not recommend MMP. They gave a whole lot of options of proportional representation. There was the supplementary member, and MMP was just one of the systems. And then we subsequently had the referendum in 1995, and it was passed 52 to 48 from memory. And then that was the for the 96 general election, we had MMP. But Bolger pulled a swifty, actually, Prime Minister Bolger, because MMP, I don't think, would have won the day necessarily. But what they did is they instead of saying what preferred system of proportional representation do you want, it became status quo or MMP, and a whole lot of the debate was lost in that aspect. The other key proportion that we should think about and think very hard, because the Royal Commission, which had global input, strongly recommended that if you move to proportional representation, which we did, then the justification for the Maori seats went. And again, Bolger didn't do that because the swing seats, the weather vane seats, were the two Hamilton East and Hamilton West. And he calculated rightly that if Tainui went on to the general role, that they would go onto the Maori role, or onto the general role, they become Maori seats. So he didn't support that, but the strong recommendation was to do so, because that's the whole point. The Maori seats were created as a temporary measure in 1864 because of the criteria there was property owning males owning land over age 21 were the only ones who could vote. So that's why they created them as a temporary measure. But the argument for supporting minority separate roles and seats is a function of first past the post. And if you go to proportional representation, then you've got to really look hard at the justification of separate seats for any group other than having a general role, because it's designed to ensure that minorities do have a better opportunity, and that's the real strength of it. So these are sort of quite important considerations. And given that mix, that's why I strongly support, and the uncertainty of local government this time is status quo, I think, is the best option for us.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. We've got Councillor Thompson, White, and then Nees.
Thank you, and thank you for your history lesson, Councillor Shirley. I thought it felt like I was back at school there for a moment, but no, excellent. Yeah, the point you raised was the point I was going to raise. I had understood that there was to be an option that if we retained the present system, we could go out and consult at the election in terms of what our people actually want in terms of their. So I too just wondered why perhaps that hadn't been listed as an option.
Mr. Groom?
No good reason. So I guess we could add a resolution to that effect into this paper.
Okay, whilst you're thinking about that, Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shirley. I'm pleased the brain fog lifted and get more of the history. Not that I necessarily agree with it all, but however, he said that. Look, I have some sympathy and empathy for what Councillor McMillan has said as well around resetting so that equity issues are more manifested in the process. However, I'm also for simplicity as well. And so I'm betwixt and between, but I do like that addition that was spoken about and the fact that, you know, you're going to look at the additional option. I like that. You know, we're going to go to a poll at some point prior to the next elections, and maybe a simple poll or a poll that goes beyond the 14 of us around this table deciding on something as important as this. So I'm a bit open to this last option, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. Mr. White, Councillor Nees.
Thank you. My reason for supporting first past the post is slightly different. I actually believe I should have the right to vote for every person that that I want to vote for. So in STV, you only get one vote, and it only gets applied once. And if it's not needed for your preferred candidate, then it drops down to the next one, the next one, and the next one. And to me, that feels a little bit like a lottery. Whereas I would rather, if there were 5 spots, I could have 5 votes to be certain that my vote is going to count for a person. So that's my philosophical reason for supporting first past the post. It's more transparent, I believe.
Councillor Renti. Thanks, Councillor Nees.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm with those who have suggested that we actually take it to the polls. So I would be supportive of the new resolution if it was to be tabled. And me, myself personally looking at this, did have a look at it, STV seems like the one that delivers better representation. I would look around this table and ask, is this forum currently representative of the demographic that of eligible voters in the Bay of Plenty? I would question that. And as to whether or not STV can deliver that, I don't know. But I think every step forward towards a better system to, as we aren't in participatory democracy, this is representative democracy, that we would find a way forward to better representation. But I would support taking it to the polls at the next election.
Right, thank you, Councillor Reti. Right, councillors, I think we're developing a consensus here. My contribution to this is, and I think Mr. Lamb put it eloquently in his briefing to us last week, STV works where you have multiple candidates. In my experience, I've participated in a lot of these. People genuinely gravitate to the position that Councillor Nees enunciated. So if you've got 10 candidates, they don't rank them all, they just rank the 2 that they want. And therefore, you're reverting back to a similar first past the post. You might waste a vote, but essentially that's my experience in doing that. But the consensus I'm getting is that for the 2025 elections, it will be first past the post by a majority of councillors. But that can we add another recommendation if you want to do it today? I'm told it doesn't have to be done today, you can do it at a later time. But if you want to do it today, that we undertake a poll of electors at the time of the 2025 elections on the electoral system to be used for this council for the 28 triennium starting in 2028.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, that's right, for the 2028 triennial election.
Mr. Chair, do you want to use the word poll? Because poll has a specific meaning, my understanding, Warwick. I thought what we were talking about was that we would at the next election consult with our communities in terms of what voting system they wanted as opposed to an actual poll. Don't know whether it's, you know, I'm splitting hairs or what.
Well, I'll take advice on that, Councillor Thompson, because I think even though you may do a consult with your community, the ultimate decision still rests with here. But be a brave councillor that sought a consultation, and the community wanted that, and you didn't proceed with it. Can we have some advice on that, Mr. Lamb?
Yeah, just looking at wording that's up there on the screen. My only change to that would be to put undertake a binding poll of electors if you were to have a poll, because it's carried out under the LEA and therefore is binding on the next two triennial elections. If you're not wanting to have a binding poll and just wanting to undertake consultation as a you know, basically a referendum question, and that's a slightly different process, slightly different wording, but it can be done at the same time as the council elections in 2025. It just means it's not binding on council. You then have to make a decision after.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think it does. So the next issue, councillors, is do you want to make a decision on that today in terms of consult, binding, a poll or a binding poll? We don't have to do it today. We could do it at a later time. Mr. Shirley, Councillor Macmillan, and then Councillor Nees.
On that point, Chairman, I think given that we're not bound by this time frame that we have with the September date for that decision, and there's quite a lot of sort of grey areas that we need to think through. I think it'd be unwise to do it on the hoof today. If there is a sentiment and an overall will to have that at the next election as part of a binding poll, then we should come back with other papers and make that option separately rather than do it in haste today on the hoof.
Thank you for that, Councillor Shirley. So where were we, Councillor Macmillan?
Yeah, I just wanted, Warwick, you did a quick in your head calculation of the cost of that, which is obviously nowhere near the $750,000, but there was still some cost. And I just wanted you to remind us of that, what that was, if we could do it at the same time as the voting.
Yeah, be good if I could remember what I said.
Sorry to put you on the spot. But 75,000, that's what I had in my head actually.
Yeah.
So it will cost 5,000, yeah, approximately.
Yeah, it sounds about right. And in conjunction with the 2025 elections, if it was a binding poll. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Nees.
You know, I think we need a bit more information about the implications of the poll and whether it should be binding or not. So I'd prefer that we don't deal with it today, that we get another paper.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I've got a consensus. It's been moved and seconded that we run with 2A, which is first past the post, and number 3, which is just notice be given by 9th of September. The secondary issue, which we will need to note and bring forward an appropriate time frame, is this issue regarding undertaking consultation / a poll with electors prior to the preparation of the voting material for 2025 election.
That's right.
Okay, so I don't know what time frame you got, but you've got that. So councillors, the resolutions will be essentially first past the post, moved by Winters and Von Duddleston. All those in favour say aye.
Further discussion, Chairman?
Sorry?
Further discussion, because wouldn't that preclude us having that discussion that we just had in terms of having the poll? I would have thought the do nothing option was the one to make today, because that doesn't preclude us from then considering having a poll at the next election, whereas this option would preclude that, as I see it.
I wouldn't have thought so, but I'll take advice on it. Mr. Lamp, can you help us?
Yeah, no, that doesn't really matter. Yeah, sure, you can do nothing and then decide in a few months before 2025 have a binding poll. But the same thing, it doesn't matter if you do decide to stay with FPP. You can still then decide to have a poll at any point.
Right. Okay, clear, Mr. Shirley? Right. Been moved and second. It's been moved and second. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. 9.9 Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Control. This should be pretty procedural.
Again,
Moved.
Can you make a note that I?
Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Controller moves Councillor Crosby, second Councillor Thompson. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Nine point 10 Residents Awareness Survey. Angela.
Tēnā koutou. I don't have a presentation today, but I've just got a few notes to speak to. And unfortunately, I have to start off by noting two errors in the paper. So page 223, 4.3 and 4.5 is essentially the same fact, but it should read that 3 in 4 people did not know that the average regional rates bill was reduced on average by $3.50 per property through subsidies from Quayside.
So say that again. 3 out of 4.
3 in 4 people did not know. 75%. So as you'll have read in the paper, many of the core results have dropped significantly, which is unfortunate and it's disappointing. But I do think that this is most likely due to the methodological and operational context changes, which are outlined in the paper. These include the introduction of the in-house rates collection, rising anti-government sentiment and distrust of all government, a cost of living crisis, and general survey fatigue. The results show that knowledge is the same, but satisfaction has dropped, which tells us that the goalposts have really shifted in terms of community expectation in the last 3 years since we did the last survey. With regards to in-house rates collection or rates invoicing, one of the factors in deciding to bring rates collection in-house was to raise awareness and be more accountable and transparent. I do think that this survey reflects a new normal for us as a result of collecting our own rates and signals greater demand for information. One insight is that those who know more about us tend to like us more, but there's significant lack of understanding about who we are and how we differ from city or district councils. These results represent one point in time and are a benchmark for the community at large. It's helpful to consider this alongside other surveys we do to customers or people we interact with. So for example, the satisfaction surveys we do through the Customer Contact Centre or the Consents Compliance team, and they do generally reflect a more positive perception of the people who interact with us. I want to note that the paper outlines a number of proposed next steps for how we intend to use these findings moving forward. In terms of lessons learned from the methodology, I'm aware that there was a survey letter that got lost in the post for 28 days, which is a lot. I have followed up with the mail provider about this, and to me, this speaks to the increasing cost and unreliability of postal surveys. Happy to take the paper as read, noting those recommendations and answer any questions.
Thank you, Angela. Councillors, Councillor Nees.
Well, thank you. I found this very sobering, but I do think there are good reasons or explanations at least for why it happened like this. I actually think since we've been receiving that communications summary with our weekly CEO's email, I've actually been quite impressed with the communication that we actually have with our community. I think we do try really hard. What it's making me think about, well, despite our efforts, it's not moving the needle. So what can we do differently? Because you cannot make people read things or to understand what we're doing. Are there any councils out there that you know of that are being very successful with their communication and raising awareness and increasing positive perceptions of their council? Are there lessons to be learnt from other people in the sector?
Very good question and very tough to answer because, as you know, generally, aside from surveys like this, it's hard to measure specific actions and communications. So I've been in touch with the regional sector about this, and I'm looking to start a bit of a working group with other regionals, and I'm involved with the SIG or the special interest group to look at whether there's a national approach we can do here, because we're not alone here. There are others struggling. I certainly see, I'm constantly looking out at what others are up to in local government, and I do the individual campaigns that I think are great, but in terms of actually measuring the success of them and whether they're moving the needle, it's really difficult to get a read.
Was wondering about producing something once a year, which is a booklet that people are going to want to keep. That's got really useful information that they hold on to because they think I might need that sometime in the future. But I wouldn't suggest that we do that unless we know that it's worked for someone else.
I agree. And I know that Rotorua do like a magazine approach, and I've certainly looked at that. Very high cost to do something like that, but worth considering. One of the recommendations in my paper that I'm keen to do, I think what would be dangerous would be to take this and tear off in a different direction, because I do think we are doing good work and getting good information out there. But one of the recommendations was a bit of an audit. So really look at what we're doing and breaking down our demographics and our audiences we need to be communicating with, and taking a bit of a systematic approach on what do they need to know and how are we getting it through to them, and then seeing what conclusions we can draw that way.
Thank you, Angela. So Councillor Von Duddleston, Scott, then Crosby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is sobering. We're spending, compared to 5 years ago, I don't know what the multiplier effect is on communication, but it's substantial. And we don't seem to be getting our message across. And I'm very keen to follow up on Councillor Nee's comment with regard to benchmarking. I think we should always be doing that. I think these, in their own space, don't give enough information. But the first thing we should do is know how we rank versus other similar organisations, and what we can do. Then take some learnings from it, though, as to how we can improve it. And it's really important that we take the learnings, not just do the work, but actually learn and improve. And the other point that came through in this was Quayside Holdings, that 80% of people don't understand about the role of Quayside and the effect it does have on our rates take, and how important it is to us. I think the highlight is just putting more FTEs into communication is not the answer, because it hasn't worked. We actually have to start thinking a lot smarter and get some benchmarking going so that we can actually have meaningful data, because data in itself, if you're only looking at yourself, you won't improve. But I thank you for getting Ipsos to do this work, and hope that we can go further with it so that we understand, because it's an area we do have to improve.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleston. Councillor Scott.
Look, I found this paper incredibly unhelpful, and I'll give you some reasons. One is the flip-flopping between ratepayers and residents as the measure for particular data points on various pages. That causes a problem with making some sort of analysis about correlation with us sending out bills with causation. So the only people who would have been upset with the bills going out are the ratepayers, and yet that's not what the data on the face of it seems to say. So that seems, I find it difficult to make that automatic causation there. When you look at page 256, you see that 33% of people are neutral, but then there's a little thing at the bottom that says that this has been rebased with the don't knows eliminated. So arguably the don't knows could have been neutral, which would have changed those orange and green dramatically, and actually changed the analysis of that sort of graph. When you look at page 261, there is a heading which says the majority of residents would like more information and better communication. But when you look at the graph, it says 33% say that. Actually, 67% don't say that. So the analysis seems to be faulty there. When you look at and there's some other page 237 about it's the different ratepayers and residents. So I find I found the paper very, very unhelpful, and I don't think that it's good to make decisions. One point I'd pick up from Councillor Van Dadelson is that doing more of the same thing and getting a worse result is close to madness. So I would be hesitant on making any decisions based on the information we got today.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the key takeouts from me was in the sample information, the urban-rural split of basically 70-30. You know, if you combine semi-urban lifestyle with rural, and it's, from my experience on this council as a Tauranga constituent member, there is a very low understanding of the role of the regional council in Tauranga, as an example, and I would suggest in Rotorua as well, generally. And that's a case of, from my experience in local government, those people that have a direct interface with the entity have a higher understanding of it, then you actually get a more genuine support or non-support for it. So I think we've got some more work to do here, and actually some critical thinking and more analysis, maybe, as Councillor Scott has indicated, to get to the nub of the awareness issue. Because if they're not aware, it's your natural instinct. You get a bill and say, what's that for? I don't like it. And the other point I'd make is, must have been last term, I think, Fiona, or maybe, so we actually did a PR campaign or an awareness campaign at great cost. And there's an argument there, you know, where did that land? And I do accept that. And I got the calls, I'm sure we all did, when people were getting their rating bills from this thing called, do I have plenty regional council? You know, what's that? Do you fix potholes, etc.? So overall, I think this is really good because it highlights a lot of things, but it doesn't actually, in my view, indicate the standard and quality of the service we deliver. So we shouldn't fall down that rabbit hole. What we need to focus on is people's awareness of what we deliver in the first instance, and then be judged by that. Because at the moment, in my view, a lot of the constituents, particularly the ones around here, do not know what we do. Whereas in the rural area, and you'd know that better than I would, Chair, they are very much aware of what we do because, you know, we are a stronger regulator to them, and we are more in their face. We're the best opportunity here, they might think we've got something to do with some yellow buses, and that's about it on a good day. So let's not overreact. Let's take a deep breath about this and focus on some improvements of awareness in the first instance, and then see what they judge us on once they understand what we do.
I agree, Councillor Crosby, and the starting point of this is half the respondents didn't know the difference between regional council activities and TA. It's not a good position to start making fundamental decisions around. So Councillor White, McMillan, and then Shirley.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I did enjoy it, and I do think it has real value. It's sobering, but not surprising, to be quite frank. I mean, when you think about central government and politicians and the bureaucracies, people don't trust it. You think about regional councils and TRNAs, the same thing. And usually it comes from, you know, a perspective that what the hell do you do? What's the difference it's made to my life? And most will say, well, stuff all. You know, so it starts from that premise, and then how do you actually create that understanding? And usually it's about how do you mobilize really great things that people can connect with. The talk fest doesn't go too far. The booklets don't go too far. People don't want to read these booklets. They want to see actions. They want to see outputs that affect them. You know, I've been part of a communication strategy with some people who are involved in trade. And small as the group was, the powerful communication they're putting out based on what they're doing, what are the impacts of what they're doing, what does it mean to you, is actually far more powerful than this is what we do in policy, this is what we do. You need to understand that role, but actually articulating it, what that converts to in terms of meaningful outcomes for people is the big connect. And I don't think we connect that well on that space. We can have some exciting things that we do that make a difference to people. That's what we should be hitting hard. We don't do that well enough. It tends to be quite nicely placed, but quite neutral in its impact. And I think, but I do enjoy your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor McMillan.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've got a few comments, but just a question. So in the report, it says if Whakatane was generally more knowledgeable. Is that, do we know why? Is it because of the stop banks and Edgecombe and?
That would be my guess.
Yeah, I thought so, yeah. I suppose what I'm thinking is a couple of things. I mean, we've just come back from the LGNZ conference, which was all about localism, all about, community engagement, citizens' assemblies, all of that. And the arrows seem to be firmly pointing into embedding that into our practice. And I know we're going, we do some great community engagement. And I think, to me, this flags up that we need to, be doing more of that, more citizens' assemblies. I mean, to me, when it says here, only when they are able to know and understand where their money is going will satisfaction improve. And I have to say, hand on heart, before I got involved in local government, which is very recently, I didn't have a clue what, I suppose I just paid the bills and thought, well, yeah, they get the job done. But I wouldn't, if someone had asked me even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe, what does regional council do? I wouldn't have known. So to me, the engagement, where people have a direct outcome on impact, or they get familiar with because they're actually taking ownership of something, I think it just is indicating that. And then the other thing is, I think we're often really humble with our brand visibility because we partner with so many stakeholders. We often, we're actually enabling through another agency by funding them. I'm just wondering if we can have more brand visibility around that. I know I've brought it up before, Fiona, but, I'm sort of come from the non-profit sector, and there's a lot of, funded by XYZ on the signature of that, agency or whatever. And then when their logo goes up on a, whatever it is, if it's to do with, restoration or whatever, that the actual regional council logo goes next to it saying funded by regional council. And I know it's only tiny little drops in the ocean, but I think when somebody engages with something which is an agency that they're passionate about, and then they happen to notice that the regional council is an enabler for that agency, then they've got more aroha for the regional council. So we may scoop in. I mean, I know it's only a small thing, but this tells me that people don't have brand awareness of us. They don't know what we're involved with. And that only when they're engaged with us, but if they might engage on a second-hand way through an agency that we support. That's just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. Councillor Shirley.
I've just got one more thing. Can I just add it in?
Quickly.
There's mention here about sort of advertising. To me, advertising falls on dead eyes and dead ears. I think unless you're engaging, just putting a full page spread in a Weekend Sun or something, people don't know. I don't know. I think the demographic that already know about us read those adverts. I think the rest of the people that don't know about us, which have come out in this survey, don't notice adverts. So I think spending a lot of budget on static advertising, social media, yes, but I don't know. I'm a bit reluctant about that. A bit on the fence, yeah.
Mr. Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. It's certainly a very sobering report, and trends are important. I think in these things, and all the trends are in the wrong direction. The messages we're getting here, the awareness of the pollution hotline, how do you explain down from 51% to 36%? You can't blame COVID for that. What's behind that? Unprompted awareness of councillors, 1%. That's quite sobering. 1%. Quite extraordinary. So communications, relevance is the key here. Are we relevant? And it's how effective our communications. Obviously, you could spend a lot of money on communications, but how effective is it? And communications is all about transmission and reception. It's what message do you transmit and how is it received? And I think we've got to look pretty hard at that, quite frankly. The feedback I get, people aren't receiving our message in a form that they can understand. And my final question would be, ISPOS, who undertook the survey, they're the third largest research provider in the world. Can I ask, Fiona, what did we pay for the survey? What did it cost us?
Yes, and if I recall rightly, it was 35,000 that we had paid for the survey. We actually went out to tender. We went back in terms of we were not satisfied with the price. But Ange, can you correct me on that?
Someone might ask about that. It was just under 35 with Ipsos plus the mail out costs, which we did separately to save a bit of money. Yes, so all in just under 50K. So it's not cheap.
Mr. Eadie. Mr. Chair. I do note that it's a resident survey, a residents awareness survey. I'm with Councillor Crosby with regards to getting some quality data around those who we do actually engage and do have a high awareness in terms of our performance. But I understand it's a separate survey. This is about the awareness. And I agree with actually both Councillor McMillan and Councillor Shirley. I think traditional media is tough to get the cut through. Just having those page ads, and there's just so much media and information, as I would argue that it's nearly a waste of money. I would have to see some pretty good data, not from the people we spend the money with, because they give a particular data set that says it's fantastic, all these eyeballs, but what is the actual impact? And because what Councillor Shirley said, it is the message, but it's also the receiver. And I'm just conscious of the type of communications that we have with our burgeoning young population who are going through adulthood, and the type of media they consume and the way they consume media. I'm not saying we go off like Wellington City Council and their TikTok, because yes, that's getting engagement, but not possibly for the right reasons. But in terms of awareness of what it is that we do, I don't have an answer for you, but I would like to see more work done on how we're going to shift the way that we deliver, rather than your just typical traditional media outlets. And I guess when I look at young people these days, they just see through corporate messaging like that. They just see through it. And so how do we have an authentic voice? I think we do reasonably well on our social media accounts. It's warm, it's informative. I enjoy that without being too crazy, because, I think we can afford to make a little bit more fun of ourselves, because I think that opens people up to it. And if you can inform people while you can make them laugh, I think you're doing the trick, and we will increase some awareness. But it's tough. I also agree with Councillor McMillan. It is actually when we're doing things with people that they really make the connection as to what it is that we do, rather than just showing them an ad and then trying to figure out, oh, okay, do they fix potholes? Yeah, kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor G. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just I think an outcome of this is clearly some discussion around how we communicate. We have to be careful what we wish for, because it appears that the more awareness we have, it's because we're in the people's faces. We're putting stock banks up in their backyards, or we're not draining something properly, or the buses aren't running on time. And if we're not careful, that gets discussed as a positive because they're aware of it. so what are we trying to achieve? Well, I'm not here to be loved. I mean, people do that naturally, obviously, but the what we really want is for people to be aware of us so they can access our services or be aware of our services. And I haven't heard us being specific about that being the outcome of our messaging. So who do we need to communicate with? Those who might be needing our services, or who we might want to engage with them, perhaps as volunteers or something, as to access their services. So we have to be really clear. We're not here just because we want to be loved, but because there's a relationship we want to extend in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's just get that specificity.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had quite a few conversations with Ange and Steph about this issue, and I have to say, when you get a sample size of less than 1,000 into a survey of potentially from 365,000 people in the Bay, it's not a very big sample size. And when I hear the cost of it, about 50K, that's $50 per person who's actually responded. So one of my family members was one of the chosen 7,000, Mr. Chairman. In 6 weeks, the letter hadn't been delivered from New Zealand Post, and the portal was closed to post on the website, which I find, and I've been to Ange back about this, and IPSO have said I'm the only one in our household. I fail to believe that I'm the member of our family household was the only one who had her letter taken 6 weeks to be delivered. So, and when you, after the 7,000, you get about 300 responses, you've got to say that's a very, very poor sample size. So all in all, I'm disappointed with the performance of IPSO in this, Mr. Chairman. The results, well, you've got to look at the trend. This is the first time. But I would hope if we ever do this again, we get better performance from the provider rather than just less than 1,000 people sample size, because we've got to do better than this. The other thing I say, every 3 years, there's a poll of all of us elected, and we get good engagement and we get the feedback. And if we didn't do our jobs properly here at this governance table, none of us would be sitting around the table. So there is a poll that's done every 3 years, and I take that as a sign of people are pretty comfortable with the way forward for us and this organisation, and I take these with a bit of grain of salt.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. That's called representative democracy, I think. Councillor Thompson.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Ange, and quite frankly, none of it surprises me. I think, just look at the environment that our communities and people are in at the moment. And I think, you touched on it, a lot of anger out there, financial restraints and real constraints. And so it doesn't surprise me. And it particularly doesn't surprise me about the urban-rural split. Here in Tauranga, we struggle against a very formidable front row commission. And that's really what most of our residents sort of are focused on because of, so we get swept up in that. So I don't think it's, I think, good, we've done it. We can only sort of probably go up from here. I don't have any problem with your recommendations. I do, however, think that we shouldn't necessarily, as Councillor Scott said, be really trying. I think the focus needs to be on our services. And getting people to understand what it is that we actually do. And frankly, this is my 5th term here, and people still don't know what distinguishes the regional council from the TLAs. I get that, but so long as we're doing a good job, that's what I'm focused on. So well done. Don't take it too much to heart. It is what it is, and we can only go up from here. So.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Well said. So my concluding comments is, look, work in progress, and Fiona, don't end up chasing your tail. Good commentary be made. And I'd suggest to you that despite the money the regional council has given the Western Bay community, if you went out on there into Devonport Road and polled a whole lot of people, the recognition in terms of the 15 million we put into the university, the 5 million into the Marine Precinct would be real low. So, right, can we have a move at that? We received the report. Mr. Thurston, Councillor McMillan, all those in favour say aye, against carried. Right, councillors, with your support, I'm going
Just
to.
to check, Chair,
Sorry.
that's only receiving it, not the other ones.
Oh, no, it's approve the plan next steps.
Was in that plan as a advertising, visibility advertising campaign, which I don't think's got a lot of support.
Okay, well, I think between Ange and Fiona, they can manage that. Don't expect to see a whole lot of money spent on that. Sorry?
So we're including it in this.
Well, sorry?
Move
Just the
second,
first.
happy, just remove the.
You happy with that? Who moved it?
There was.
Thurston. You happy with that, Mr. Thurston? Councillor McMillan? Okay, we'll let that stand. Right, councillors, with your agreement, I'm going to crank this along because I've already deferred your workshop for risk and assurance to 1:30. So you've got some time to have some kai in between. So 9.1, Community Participation Impact Report, Annual Report. Stephanie McDonald. Any comments, Steph?
Tēnā koutou katoa. We'd like to give a brief overview, if we may.
Yes, into it, please.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to update you on the community participation impact area and how we plan to build on the progress. Just to remind you, this is one of 3 impact areas that were initiated through the long-term planning process in 2021, and there was an action plan that came to council for approval in December 2021. My name's Steph McDonald. I'm the Community Engagement Team Leader, but in this context, I'm leading the Community Engagement work stream and lead the cross-organisational network that's delivering on this impact area. I'm joined today by a number of other work stream leads, and I'll invite them to introduce themselves.
I'm Graham Howard. I'm the Corporate Planning Lead. My role was particularly focused around a number of the community funding programs, our Regional Safety Rescue Services Fund, Community Initiatives Fund, and EAF, Environmental Enhancement Fund.
Good, Steve Groom, involved in the democracy aspects of this action plan.
Kia ora Council, Pim Demonchi, and I hold the pen on the volunteers component of this plan.
Our paper is item 9.11. It's on page 227 if you've got a PDF version. Now, I recognise that the resident survey results when seen in isolation might lead to conclude that this has not been an area of focus for council. I assure you, we have been busy. We'd like to share some examples in this presentation of some of the highlights, some of the standouts for us. And although we're not seeking any decisions here today, some of our work streams may highlight decisions that are to come in the near future. Some of the highlights that we'd like to draw your attention to include the work that we've done in the youth space. So the photo that's up on our top left is the Canvas Careers Expo. That's attended by thousands of young people and their families every year. And actually, we're setting up for the 2023 event right now. So if councillors would like to join us at any time tomorrow or on Friday up until 2 p.m, please come and join us. It's a fantastic opportunity to share the career pathways and the work that we do with young people. And the photo that you can see up there, that's some of our scientists who were giving up their weekend last year to attend, bring their children along, but also some of the young people that we've worked with previously through the Youth Involvement Panel who are also giving up their time to talk to other young people about the work the Regional Council does. In the top right, that's a snip from our School Sustainability and Resilience Fund panel, a group of young people who helped allocate funding to projects. And in the bottom right, that is the team planning the freshwater engagement work that has been underway for the last 4 months. We have held over 30 events at marae, at fishing clubs, at bowling clubs, at schools, at community halls and online to talk with community from Waiho Bay to Katikati to Galatea and pretty much everywhere in between about the changes coming in freshwater management. So we're trying to pull out all the stops with as many different techniques as we can to reach our community. In terms of where we're at and where we're looking to build, I've just borrowed some stats from the 2018 census just to highlight the range of our community. Historically, participation in council engagement has not represented the full range of people in our community. The graph on the left highlights our broad population in terms of age and gender, but if you look to the right, you can see our Māori population is significantly younger. So when we engage well with young people, hopefully we're also engaging well with Māori. We have tough conversations to come, and we need to look at different ways of getting feedback and input from community. The photo in the bottom right is from a recent meeting in Katikati. We had plenty of growers from that community coming to talk to us about what changes in freshwater management was going to mean for them on the ground. But we're also looking to see what others are doing. The Open Government Partnership, which is part of an international collaboration that New Zealand's been involved in for more than 10 years, is encouraging more transparency, is encouraging more deliberative processes. And we can see our friends down at Wellington City Council are initiating a citizens' assembly right now to look at how they plan for their long-term plan. So we're looking to learn from others and looking to see what might be applicable and what might be helpful here for us dealing with the issues that we have with our community. And now we'd like to share some highlights of what we have in the volunteer space.
Thanks, Steph. Kia ora, councillors. So just a couple of quick highlights. The numbers in the report. Here we go. These are the three measures that that you approved in the plan that was released. So this there are one set of corrections to each of these numbers. So there were 69 care groups. I did miss out the Tarawera Pest Control group from the initial reporting, so apologies to them. And they have 6 volunteers covering 500 odd landowners, and they contributed 300 hours. So just a few adjustments there. The numbers are down a little bit on last year, and we're putting some of that down to the weather. Also, a couple of our estuary care groups have gone into abeyance with a sort of, shall we say, ageing demographic, and perhaps a little bit less focus on mangrove removal from some of our estuaries. And one or two groups that have been supported in the Rotorua catchments haven't been active in the past year due to some shortages in the land management team in Rotorua, but there are plans to reinvigorate those groups in the current financial year. I've also included here a snapshot from Ongatiti Forest Restoration Project, which is one of the more active groups here in the Western Bay. And I've included something from our dashboard, which I think I showed you last year, which just gives you an idea of the kind of data that we can collect. Now, some groups love this app. We call it the Kete Taiao app, and others are motivated more by the trapping and less by the data entry. And so sometimes it is a little bit of a struggle getting the dots on the maps, but it's all great fun. So thank you.
Thanks, Pim. Yeah, just to briefly go through a couple of the highlights around the various community funding programs. So looking at the funds there, so the Environmental Enhancement Fund we've had operating for a number of years. We had 25 new community-led projects funded this year. As stated in the report, we had like the funding available for that fund is 300,000. We did have that oversubscribed. The actual funding allocated through those projects was around about 240,000. That's the highest number of projects we've had funded through that scheme for a number of years. And those projects across the region, there's a list of the projects on our website, but it covers a lot of things around restoring land restoration, pest plant management and things like that. Our Regional Safety Rescue Services Fund, the two biggest organisations funded, or the biggest grants funded through that are Surf Life Saving, where we provide funding for the council-funded lifeguard service. Now that's done, this fund is managed through CDMG, and also the Rotorua Mountain Bike Club and the First Response Unit. It's kind of almost like operates in a similar way to a surf club would, but for the mountain biking in Rotorua. And then the Community Initiatives Fund, you recall through the deliberations on the annual plan this year, there was some funding allocated towards a new SIF project, taking back our beaches, focused on the community response to the arena grounding. Also, just being mindful, particularly around the EAF area, a number of those projects do run several years, so up to 3 years. And so there's a number of existing projects that are from previous years that we're still managing there. Just very briefly, just flagging a couple of the things where we're looking for the focus for the current financial year. We've got the existing EAF fund, which is open for applications. We've received a number of applications for that this year. We're looking at managing those existing EAF, SIF and RSRS projects, and we'll be doing a review of the RSRS fund ahead of the next funding round next year. And of course, looking through the next long-term plan, the relevant funding approach and funding levels from 2024 onwards. Thank you.
In terms of the democratic participation aspects of this plan, sorry, I've gone back past it. That work's fallen into two main streams, one around the 2022 election and with regards to our earlier conversation about the electoral system discussion, there'll be exciting opportunities for us to further engage public in the lead up to the 25 election. And then in our business as usual, transparency of decision-making actions. It's been pleasing to see an increase in live streaming of meetings over this past year and around limiting the number of publicly excluded items.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, team. We welcome any questions.
Thank you, Steph. Councillors, questions? Councillor Nees.
We had a discussion over morning tea about how many people actually watch our live streams. Can you give us any indication? Are we a hot item?
Anecdotally, I suspect it's mostly staff, but Steve, is that something that we actively track, or is that something we might need to come back to the councillors on?
We'll probably need to come back on that. We do actively track. I think the difficulty is in determining how many of those viewers are outside of this building.
Okay, anything else, councillors? Right, thank you, team. Much appreciated. Right, councillors, I'll move we go into public excluded. Mr. Thurston, Mr. Von Buddelston, all those in favour say aye.